Want me to turn the lights?
That way.
Over here.
I'm gonna walk by just here.
Oh, okay.
You guys turn the projector on, maybe.
Push that one button.
Yeah. There's a blue ring flashing.
There you go. Is there
Hello,
a
Hal. Where's it, Dave? Hal is I try my best to have a science fiction reference from before my time.
There you
Okay,
go.
great. Okay, so what we're going to do today is just a little bit of a breakdown about what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to talk about NWALT, Northwest Arkansas Land Trust. Obviously, that's the organization I work for. And then we're going to really, I don't know, give some perspective about why an organization like ours is needed. We're going to talk about some of the work we do in the region, how we do it, and then this is where I kind of am going to diverge from a presentation that some of you guys have probably seen a few times. I'm going to give it, really put us in the context of the greater conservation community here in Northwest Arkansas. I'm going to talk about where we fit into that, where we're a little bit different, and how that really works to make local land conservation successful in the region. I'll give you a spoiler, we can't do it alone, and we work with a lot of people. So hopefully that's what we'll come away with, is that what we do is important, and how we do it is unique, and also fits into a greater whole. So, has anyone heard about the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust before? Show of hands. Yeah, that's what I like to see. So, I think guys, this may be old news, but we're focused on Northwest Arkansas, and what does that area mean? I've got a nice little map I'm going to show you, but we're a non-governmental, non-profit 501c3, and that's really kind of foundational to the character of our work and what we're able to do. And we work to permanently protect the landscapes of mangroves for wildlife and people in the region. So that idea of permanence is really integral as well. So we don't conserve land for 20 years or for 100 years or 1,000 years. We don't put any kind of time frame on the conservation. So lands that we protect, there is no intention for when that protection will no longer apply. We are what is called an accredited land trust, and what that means is that we meet a set of standards that govern the way we work, from how we protect land, the way we manage our finances and governance and transparency, all those things. It's a lot of really strict standards that are set at a national level from the Land Trust Accreditation Commission, which is another independent nonprofit. And of the 1,700 land trusts that are in the United States, did you guys know there were that many land trusts in the United States? No. Land trusts are a lot more common in other parts of the country. North Carolina has probably 200 in that state. Arkansas has 2 or 3. And so we're growing as far as land trusts go. And there's a lot of diversity in the land trust world, but being accredited is, regardless of where you are, a really big deal, because what that means is for landowners, all those standards, the ultimate goal of those standards is to be able to back up the claim that we can permanently protect land. So by being accredited, we're meeting standards that are shown to really robustly protect properties for their natural value. All right, so back to who is the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust. Our mission is stated right here. The mission of the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust is to preserve and enhance quality of life in Northwest Arkansas through the permanent protection of land. So I've talked a little bit about permanence. I've talked a little bit about where we are. But this quality of life is another component that I like to highlight, because we recognize that part of why we do what we do is because we as a community of people benefit greatly from abundant and diverse natural areas. And so think about clean water and clean air that we get to breathe, scenic views surrounding where we live and play and work, healthy and diverse wildlife habitats, wildlife populations. Those are all things that ultimately, either directly or indirectly, benefit our way of life. And they make Northwest Arkansas a great place to live. But unfortunately, because, oh, well, let me talk about this real quick. This is where we work. So when we talk about Northwest Arkansas, we mean this, essentially this 1/4 of the state. And there are two reasons why we set this as our priority. Number one, because Benton and Washington County is growing very rapidly. It's one of the fastest growing regions in the country. It's like top 25 fastest growing regions in the state. 30 people per day on average move to Northwest Arkansas. And that's faster than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So we're not only growing in numbers, but we're growing at the pace of growth. So lots of people moving in here, and we're happy about that. You know, we get a lot of great amenities from the growth, but we recognize that just as we identify places to build, we should be identifying places that we don't build. That way, we can accommodate people, but also accommodate all those other really important things that really, you know, are bigger than we are as, you know, people. But so that's why we're here. All these other areas are really because we get a lot of landowners from that region that want to protect their land. And even though those properties aren't under the same amount of development pressure, they're still really important. And if we can conserve land in these outlying rural areas now, as growth increases and people start to move out to those areas, we'll have some already placed, we'll be ahead of the growth. So we're really happy to be moving into those regions. We think it's really important to be protecting them now. All right, so as I mentioned, our region is changing. This is what we call the Big Red Blob. Those are the towns, you know, the I-49 corridor, as they call it. Just so you know, the green down here is forest land. So we've got some forest here and some forest here. Blue is obviously water. And this kind of pale yellow here, the tan, that's farmland, pasture land, or prairie. And then this is in 2011. So you can see we got an airport in that time frame. The boundary of growth has really increased, and also, I don't know how well you can see it on the presentation, but one of the biggest things that's changed between these two maps is the amount of roads that we have. And so roads are infrastructure, but also really slice up habitats. You know, they are really, they really tend to fragment habitats. So also you'll see a lot of farmland and pasture land has been developed. And if you drive out to Centerton, Arkansas, Cave Springs, you'll see that really readily because it's all rooftops. So, you know, we think there's a better way to do it, and we want to be offering part of the solution. Okay, so what kinds of places do we protect? So that's sort of who is land trust. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what do we do and how do we do it. So what do? We protect property, but not just any property. It needs to be of conservation value, but what we find is that there are lots of different values that are worth conserving. So it's the stuff that you would presume a land trust would protect, such as wildlife habitat, forests, wetlands and prairies, you know, wildlife habitats, but also in addition to those things, we also try to preserve some of the rural identity of Northwest Arkansas by protecting family farms, local food sources, historic sites, and we also know that if we're going to be a community that values nature, we need to give people a chance to get to nature. So we do work to preserve and enable outdoor access to the outdoors through recreation. So lots of different conservation values that we protect. And one thing that's almost always the case is that a single property that has any kind of natural quality to it meets a lot of these values all at once. So maybe a forest, well obviously it's also a wildlife habitat. And if there's a creek running through it or a riparian buffer, well it's also supporting water quality in the region. So, and then there are the people's stories behind the land too that really bring out that cultural heritage. So lots of lands are multiple conservation values. We hardly ever find a landowner that has land that is not of real conservation value. So, all right. So bear with me, get ready. We're going to talk some jargon here. But this is kind of a really important part of how we work. So how do we protect land? We do it through two primary methods. One is through land donations. That's where the landowner has a parcel of land that's undeveloped, might be forest or habitat or something. And for some reason or other, they desire to give that land to the land trust. Sometimes it's because they don't have heirs and they don't really see where it could end up next, so they want to ensure that it's protected by giving it away to the land trust. Other times, owning the land is a burden because it carries with it lots of obligations and such for maintaining that land. They can give the land to the land trust because of that reason. If a landowner gives their land to us, we accept it as a preserve, and so any land that's given to the land trust is forever kept for its natural value. We won't sell it or develop it or anything like that. The most we'll do for the land is restore the habitat in there to help to encourage the healthiest ecosystems we can for the region. For landowners that give their land to us, that the value of that land is counted as a charitable gift, so that is tax deductible. If the landowner wants to keep their land, maybe they plan to sell it one day, or they have kids they want to give it to, or someone they want to pass the land on to. They may not want to give it away, but they still want the assurance that that land is protected. In that case, we do what's called a conservation easement. And a conservation easement, boiled down, is essentially a legal agreement between the landowner and the land trust that permanently restricts certain activities on the land that may negatively impact its conservation value. So what I mean by that is the landowner says from here on out forever, no one can ever divide this 40 acres into 2-acre lots and build houses on it. From this point forward, no one can do exploratory drilling on this property. Whatever, the developmental, the potential for that land to be developed is taken off the table because we're going to keep it natural. If they sell the land, whoever buys that land does so with the easement in place. So it doesn't really matter who the landowner is from that point forward. They have to follow the terms of that easement. Now, can the landowner enforce the easement? Not really, because there are a lot of things that could put the easement at risk. Maybe a neighbor that's not very amenable to the easement, maybe they don't care, maybe they don't know about it, or maybe they don't realize where the boundary is. It could be a completely honest mistake. But there are times when the easement is violated, the terms are violated. The Northwest Arkansas Land Trust, our role in the easement is establishing and drafting, and then from that point forward, maintaining that easement and enforcing it. So we have to be responsible for that. In that case, there are also tax deductions that can be taken for putting an easement on your land. Those are income tax deductions that are from the conservation easement tax incentive that's part of the last edition of the Farm Bill that were made permanent last year, which we're really excited about. Now, I say tax stuff, but really, if that's something that you want to learn more about, you should talk to a tax expert because we're not qualified to advise on that. Yeah?
Can a conservative conservation easement ever be revoked? Can the owner or future owners go to court and have it taken off or something?
The answer is, in rare cases, yes, but it's very, very difficult. And I don't think that they could just do it because they feel like it, if that makes sense. So one thing that an easement can't protect against is eminent domain. The thing is with eminent domain that, it's sort of like the government is the one that sort of was like, goes in there and says, well, we really, really need to put a road here, so we're gonna have to take that land, but we'll pay you for it. The thing about, eminent domain is that a conservation easement is not a guaranteed protection against that, but it is a hurdle that has to be jumped. So it could be the thing that makes that particular plan to put the road there just costly enough to make it not worth it. And so there have been examples in the country of eminent domain that was thwarted through conservation easements, but there have also been examples where the conservation easement did not help. So.
And another follow-up question. If the conservation easement is violated for whatever reason, has the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust ever gone forward to fight it?
Yes, we have. In one instance, a neighboring landowner didn't know where the boundary was, and so they logged a portion of the land. And so, so we
didn't know where it was at.
Do what?
Didn't know where it was at.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, so what we did, and we're not a litigious organization. Part of our accreditation standards is to always have funding available for legal defense of the easement. but we try not to dip into it unless absolutely necessary. In this case, the landowner logged the land, and we told them, well, you logged it, so you need to replant it. And he, was resistant to that, but we eventually convinced him to. And then he replanted shortleaf pine when he had taken mixed hardwood.
Yeah.
And because it was cheaper, obviously, it was the cheapest option. So we had to go to court to get him to actually replant with mixed hardwood, oaks and hickories. Yeah.
To do a conservation easement, do you also have to go through a zoning process?
No, I don't think so, because it's not related to, well, because the zoning is, I would consider a subset of the land use in general. So the landowner being privately owned, it may be in a commercial development zone, but if the easement is in place, it doesn't really matter because it's not going to get developed anyway. Yeah.
So is there a minimum amount of land that you would consider the land trust?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Actually, those are all great questions. You guys are really making me reach deep for these answers. But that one I have a good answer. The answer is no for us. But that's not always the case. That's part of why we're here, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But no, we have easements that are 7/10 of an acre, and we have easements that are, 300 plus, and there's no upper limit either.
Sam, would you rather take questions just like as a whole bunch at the end?
Well, I do worry that if we do that,
Yeah.
then we might, because some of this stuff is kind of heavy.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
We're gonna leave it up to you then, but
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure you know that you're.
Yeah, no, this is the best place to talk about some of these
Okay, super.
nitty-gritty details. Yeah.
What about enforcing the casual trespass?
Uh-huh.
Who does that?
Well, so, that would be something where we would work with the landowner to do. So, we post that it's a conserved property, we post the boundaries, especially with a conservation easement, that we really partner with the landowner to help with that. And, because we can't be on land every day, and that's the sort of thing you really have to have. We've had some trespassing issues, and short of putting up, wildlife cameras, it's really hard to police, but it is something that we, have to consider as far as the easement is
So the
concerned.
land isn't open to the public, unless we.
Exactly, so it really depends, and that's another thing about the land trust is that we don't have to guarantee public access, which is not always the case for other agencies, but it is something that if the landowner wishes, we will open to the public, and so we actually have some examples of that, of both cases. Yes.
I would just like to ask if you could repeat people's questions. So we
Oh,
can-
absolutely, yeah. So that was, the first question is trespassing, does the land trust have responsibility in policing against trespassing? My answer was sort of. And the second one was, is public access allowed or not? And the answer is it could be both. So, yeah.
How many pieces or parcels of land do y'all take care of?
So currently we have, I think 9 under conservation easement, and then we have 6 that are preserves that we own. Yeah. And we're growing. We have a list of landowners that are waiting to work with us, but it's a really, it's a deep process, I would say, to make sure that we get this right. And so we do our best, but with our current staff capacity, we've got a line of sorts. So yeah, it's a long-term thing, so sometimes it takes some time. Okay, so good questions. I did hit this button. Bequest of land is another option. For some landowners, they want to live on their land, but then after they're gone, that's when they really care what happens next. And so it's an option to write us into your will, to bequest the land to us. If you do so, we'd like to be a part of that process so that we can get all the expectations lined out and everything and make sure that the land itself is a good fit for us. We do have also some landowners that have like an acre in a subdivision that they want to give to the land trust more as a financial gift that we can use to sell and get that money. But if it's undeveloped property, we don't do that. We could also do bargain sale or purchase. We really feel like in Northwest Arkansas, this is the most effective tool because a lot of people need to sell their land. They can't afford to give it away. However, we don't have ready funds for acquisition currently. That's moving forward. We'll need to start working towards that. And being a nonprofit, you can imagine how we'll do that. Through community support, of course. And then, of course, we can do stuff like long-term management agreements or long-term leases. These sorts of things are really more applicable for agricultural conservation easements. And so land trusts throughout the country, actually some of them are focused as agricultural easements. And they do a lot of work to ensure that there is someone farming on the land to keep it productive. And so leasing the land is one of the ways that they can do that. So, all right, so in addition to saving the land that we just got, see, I told you it's gonna be a little heavy, thanks for bearing with me. In addition to all that stuff, the actually getting the land conserved, we do lots of other stuff, like the habitat restoration. Here's Wilson Springs Preserve. I know some of you have actually been on the site and have helped with some of our restoration work there. This is ongoing. We have more work that we're about to do this year to return what is currently woody overgrowth in what was historically wet prairie. We're taking out the woody overgrowth to restore the wet prairie and have some really cool, really unique plants and animals that use that habitat that are moving back into that land. It's really exciting to watch and be a part of. We do community engagement, stuff like this, but also environmental education. And you guys know, many of you are probably aware of our National Mountain Member Classroom and Nature Center. It's a environmental education program. Right now we have every third grader in the Fayetteville School District comes on a half-day field trip for that. If you want to volunteer to help as a field trip leader, I would love to get you plugged in because that's something that we need. We have about 900 kids that come through there now, and it's growing because we're reaching out to other schools as well. And so if that's your thing, send me an email after when you get a chance because we'll get you scheduled. We also do biological monitoring tabs on the ecosystems that we're working to protect. And we do ongoing stewardship, which includes annual monitoring. That's one of the ways that we make sure that the easement is being honored, at least annually. We also do habitat management plans for our properties to make sure that we know what to do and then implement. We also, as we mentioned before, are prepared to defend the land legally. But what it comes down to is helping landowners protect the land that they love. Oh, yeah.
So in the first one that you said habitat restoration, I think you said Wilson Springs.
Wilson Springs.
Where is that?
That, good question. So if you look, this is Sam's Club in, well, just up the road in Fayetteville. So this is just as you drive south on I-49, you'll see it on your right.
It's on your right.
Mm-hmm. This is a place, this is a property that is not currently open to the public, but we're getting there.
So if we're driving, that blue line is the freeway, is that correct?
This is actually the spring run, so it is a spring-fed stream, and this is Clabber Creek, so this is the interstate, just off the picture here.
What is that where the golf course used to be?
The golf course used to be right over here. Actually, this is some of the old greens, right? Yeah, this is the golf course right here on the left. So we're just east of the golf course. In Fayetteville. Right, yes. And I'll talk a little bit more about Wilson Springs in a second. Of course, regional partnerships are vital to our mission. That's where I'm going to get to real quick for just a few more minutes. Obviously, our master naturalists are a huge part of our partnership, so we rely on you guys greatly. So we're part of a larger conservation effort here in Northwest Arkansas. We're not the only ones here at the table. And so we have lots of other landholding nonprofits and agencies. You can see the Nature Conservancies. They have a regional office here in Fayetteville. Arkansas Natural Heritage Commission has conserved large tracts of land in the area. Game and Fish, Hobbs State Park. Ozark Regional Land Trust is another land trust that has some lands conserved in the region. And then the U.S. Forest Service with Weddington Woods and down south and east. We also have some federal agencies that may not hold land, but do support conservation either through grant funding or other technical assistance. We have nonprofit organizations that are really less about land conservation and more about education and outreach leading to conservation. We have other organizations that are either technical organizations like the Watershed Conservation Resource Center, or other conservation organizations that do a little bit of everything. So it's a crowded room, right? And the thing is that, number one, we work with everyone on here, and others that I probably forgot. And we also have a unique contribution that we make, just like everybody here. So is anybody on this list ineffective or irrelevant for land conservation in Northwest Arkansas? Absolutely not. These are all important groups. But what makes us unique? What are we here for, right? Why are we necessary? And number one is we have a relatively small regional scale. Think of the Nature Conservancy. You know, one of the questions we get a lot is, how are you different from the Nature Conservancy? The answer is, the Nature Conservancy is worldwide. We're very regional. Their focus is large tracts of undeveloped land and endangered habitats or endangered species. So we, on the other hand, don't have those restrictions because we have a broad list of conservation values. And actually, part of why we're here is because the Nature Conservancy was receiving a lot of calls from landowners that wanted to preserve their land. And they could not work with the Nature Conservancy because their land, although it was highly valuable for conservation, simply didn't line up with their specific requirements for what they try to do. So one of our founding board members is Tim Snell with the Nature Conservancy. So he was part of the original group of board members that founded the Land Trust back in 2003. We're also non-governmental, so some landowners don't feel comfortable working with the government agency, either because they're worried about the future or don't trust them to do exactly what they hope to do. So we have a lot of landowners that feel a lot more comfortable working with a private nonprofit. Also, back to the public access thing, if you conserve your land with the Arkansas Natural Heritage Commission, if you donate to them or sell your land to them, since they are funded in part by taxpayer dollars, they have to make the land accessible to the public. So for some landowners, that's fine, that's not a problem.